I'd like to welcome everyone to this joint meeting of the School Board and the Marion County Board of County Commissioners to deal with a very important issue of shortages of schools and how to fund them. But at this time, I'd like to ask everyone to stand and we'll pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Yes, sir. For the Board of County Commissioners, I have Chairman Curry.
Here.
Vice Chairman Stone.
Here.
Commissioner Bryant.
Here.
Commissioner Zalek.
Here.
For the Marion County School Board, Chair Campbell.
Here.
Vice Chair Thrower.
Here.
School Board Member Conrad.
Here.
School Board Member Cummings.
Here.
School Board Member James.
Here.
Superintendent Golick.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Just a couple of quick announcements. If you have cell phones, if you'd put them on silence, appreciate that, or turn them off. We will be taking public comment at the end of the meeting, and appreciate anybody's comments that will add to the solution. I've just got some quick opening comments, hopefully to kind of set the floor for today. And I welcome everyone here this morning in a spirit of cooperation to work on a community issue which has reached a critical point, and that being adequate schools and the best funding sources, while understanding that time is of the essence. I believe that most, if not all of us in this room, understand the need for the building of additional schools and to determine the best way to pay for them. Issues do not get any more important than those dealing with our children and our education. I've said many times, and this is absolutely true, the toughest elected position in Marion County is being a school board member. Dealing not only with people's taxes, but dealing with their children. I think our school board members do a fantastic job every day, and I just wanted to shout out to them the appreciation that we have for the work that you do. I don't know exactly where this morning will take us. That's why we're here, to find out, but I know that the answers to our concerns are within this room. I also know that through the thoughtful and courteous exchange of ideas, a solution will be found, and this time next year, we'll be worrying about something else. We will have solved this problem. Our journey is one filled with legal obstacles and potentially conflicting opinions. However, we all must keep our eye on the objective of finding the best and most efficient ways to build more schools for our children, and again, within a responsible time frame. When we leave here this morning, we must all be totally committed to not just the projects, but we need to be committed to one another. Each elected body respecting the other's needs for information and the time to do their job. The system has brought two elected bodies together for collaborative purposes. So let us use the best ideas available to produce the best solution. The eyes of the community are upon us, looking for statesmanship, professional demeanor, and the best possible solutions. Let's give them that. This is a workshop for fact-finding and consensus building. A supermajority of the county commission ultimately is required to pass impact fees. We only have 4 commissioners, so at this time it would be 4 out of 4. But even after getting to a consensus, the county has much work to do to prepare. Updating the 2006 Educational Impact Fee Ordinance, updating the interlocal agreements, updating the collection agreements within the county with municipalities, and time to advertise and hold various meetings to accomplish the items mentioned above. If we agreed on everything today and walked out of here, probably the earliest the county could bring this to a conclusion would be sometime in the middle of October or into November. But finally, I welcome the opportunity to work with all of you to solve this important community issue. I have faith and confidence in each one of the members on this board and the stakeholders that hopefully we will hear from later. We must remain together to accomplish our mission on behalf of the community and ultimately the children. So with that, I appreciate you being here, and I don't know if Dr. Campbell has any comments, but love
Sure.
to hear them.
Thank you, Chairman Curry, and thank you so much for your very thoughtful opening for this meeting. We at the Marion County School Board understand that this is a collaboration and a discussion and a conversation that needs to happen between the two elected bodies sitting before you today. Prior to 2021, it had been more than a decade since these two bodies had gotten together and had communication. And so since that time, there have been new faces that have been added to the bodies, and we're just grateful for the opportunity to sit here. Thank you again, Chairman Curry, for your very thoughtful words and understanding the challenges that we're experiencing in our community with our most precious resources, our children. And on behalf of the Marion County School Board, we're excited to be here for this discussion and can't wait to get started. So thank you,
Thank
Chairman
you.
Curry.
And Commissioner Stone has been our liaison from the county commission to the school board. And Commissioner Stone, I don't know if you have any opening comments or?
I'll just welcome everyone. I thank you all for your participation. I thank you for the information that we have already received from many of you in the audience today. I think that's going to be very helpful in our discussion. I would say to both the two chairs for us to also recognize and remember the interlocal agreement. When we did put the interlocal agreement together, we did purposefully not include anything regarding impact fees because we knew the study was in play and we knew that we would have to come back together and address this issue. There is a technical working group that has been identified in the interlocal agreement, and so that is a body that stands ready, I believe, that includes all of the municipalities as well as a representative from both the school board and the county commission that would step back in to address this issue when it is asked to be reconvened. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I don't want to overreach my authority. I'm one commissioner. I've already said that I believe everybody in the room believes that we need schools built. We need them built as quickly as possible. I think the three funding sources also are being embraced by the elected officials in regard to, it's probably not going to take just one item, impact fees. Ultimately, it's going to take some sales tax and probably bond issue money to accomplish. I think the number I saw was $1.1 billion. The issue at hand really is to study the information. We actually received some updates last night that we're kind of processing, and to just to understand the time frame. What is the best method to proceed? And that's where you kind of get in the weeds a little bit. Do you do it piecemeal? Do you do a 3-5 year plan, or do you look at it and try and come up with a 15-year plan and look at all funding sources in a very quick time frame? I'm not talking a year or two, but in some time frame that would make sense. I think those are some of the things that we'll be kind of fleshing out this morning. So with that said, let's get on to the long-range school planning study. I guess Banesh, consultant.
Good morning. I'm Nilgun Camp with Benesh. The presentation, let me just check this. Okay, presentation starts with going through the long-range plan and then continues with the impact fee.
Could you speak up, please?
Yes.
Or our volume to.
Yeah, or pump her volume up a little bit.
Testing, can you hear me better or? Okay.
Not really.
All right. Okay. In terms of the background, we start our planning studies by looking at the overall community's growth levels. And Marion County, out of the 67 Florida counties, Marion County ranks in 19 in population, 21st in projected population growth, and again 19th in absolute growth. It also was 12th in residential permitting in 22. So that basically says it's a larger county and it's continuing to grow among the top 30% of the Florida counties. What is somewhat moderating that, it's also an older county, so it ranks about 45th in student generation rate. So that kind of moderates the need a little bit, but at the same time, the taxable value per capita in terms of ranking is about 44, so that's among the bottom 1/3 of the counties. So that kind of, and that's one of the main revenue sources for school district, so that creates challenges. As far as the background, the school district had concerns about the recent growth levels. We're considering adopting the impact fee again, but at the same time, they wanted to understand what the future needs are. So they went really sort of above and beyond the regular impact fee study and tasked us with preparing this long-range plan. And it's really that this plan is meant as a tool. It's really looking at the conditions that we can see today with the best available data, but then school district would review that every so often and adjust according to trends. So when we start with demographics, this chart is showing population growth trends going back to 1980s. The green line is Marion County and yellow is Florida. And you can see 1980 to 2000, the growth rate was significantly higher. That kind of continued through the economic boom of 2005. During the recession, the county lagged behind the state average, but then again started to increase at or above state average since then. And you can see future projections, both Beaver medium and high on the going forward. One other important thing about this, when all this growth was happening in the 80s, 90s, 70s, school districts built a lot of schools. And those schools now are in their 30 years old, 40 years old, and more. So that creates a need on the maintenance side that adds to the financial concerns. And we are seeing that with many school districts. This is showing the permitting trends. And again, you can see during the economic booms of 2005, 6, 7, the permitting, residential permitting reached 7,500 units or so. And now you are sort of getting closer to that level. And this chart is now showing 22, which is higher than even 21. So it was about 6,500 units. So there's a lot of activity going on. We used this information in two different ways. We looked at past 5 years, and average units were about 3,500 per year. We also were hearing concerns about, at the time, maybe there would be a recession coming, what would happen. We looked at the entire 30-year period, and that was averaging about 2,800. So we prepared scenarios under both assumptions. Again, this is a chart showing housing unit projections from different sources. We have University of Florida's Bureau of Economic and Business Research, medium level and high level. So they range from 2,300 units per year to about 4,600. In between is about 3,500. Again, residential permitting over the past 30 years averaged 2,800. Just past 5 years is 3,500. And then we also looked at the long-range plan, transportation plan estimates, and they are quite a bit lower at 1,600. So given all this information, our primary scenario uses 3,500. We think it's very reasonable, but we, again, just to be on the, to test it, we also use that 2,800 as an option per year. So,
Yes. Excuse me, Commissioner Stone.
Could you please confirm to us, did that include all the municipalities as well as Marion County permitting?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
We then look at where this development is likely to occur. So when you look at the county, the eastern side is all environmental land. And then the county established the farmland preservation area in 2005 in the northwest section. So then basically that's pushing all the development primarily to the southern portion of the county. So when we look at the square miles, out of 1,600 square miles, really 760, about half of it, is where most of the development is likely to occur in the future. This chart is showing the sort of progression of single home construction. Like the very top left chart is homes built before 1950s, and then it goes every decade. And you can kind of see all the way to 70s, most of the construction were in the sort of a middle corridor of the county, and then it starts spreading everywhere. And after you pass the farmland preservation area, after 2010, it started being pushed down to the southern portion. So it's kind of showing that trend. And then finally, we look at availability of vacant land, because that could be a restricting element. But again, Marion County has quite a bit vacant land already zoned as residential, so that will not be an element that restricts future development. And then we try to understand where, again, confirming where the projected developments are likely to occur again. So this chart is showing what the long-range transportation plan projects. So those are the purple boxes. And the darker the purple, more density is indicated. And then the yellow circles are residential developments are likely to come along over the next 5 years. The green squares are about 6 to 10 years. And then the diamonds, the blue diamonds, are over 10 years. So when we look at it, you can kind of see both the long-range plan and the more near upcoming development is concentrated around the sort of a southern section in that right below Ocala. So once we sort of determine the growth levels and approximately where that growth is going to occur, then we want to understand what level of students these new homes are going to generate. To do that, we look at the student generation rate, and we start with the median age. Again, an older community has fewer students, and this chart is showing the median age trends over time going back to 80s. And Marion County consistently has been older than the state average. The city itself is younger, but the county is older. This is showing the age groups, and green bars are Marion County, orange bars are Florida, and you can see green bars are outweighing the yellow ones or orange ones in the older age groups again. And then this is showing the age distribution percentages. So the school-age kids in the county are about 16% of the population, which is pretty close to Florida average, 17%, and then it's higher in the city. So then, in terms of when taking all this demographic data and converting to school needs, we basically, again, take the population data, estimate the housing units, and then look at what level of students these units are likely to generate. Student generation rates are calculated based on taking the student addresses and matching them with the property appraiser database to see what type of housing unit they are coming from. And we look at them by school level, age of home, and on a countywide basis. So this chart is showing this analysis for all homes in the county. And you can see we started with several categories and then decided that we really didn't have a big enough sample for townhouses or condos. They are pretty small, like there's only 2% of the units in the county are townhouses and 1% is condos. So we combine all the single family, detached, attached, and then condos and apartments. and this is measuring all homes. So it's basically saying every 4 to 5 homes generate 1 student, 0.225, 0.26, right around there. We then want to understand what the newer homes are doing. For planning purposes, we are more interested in what new homes are generating. And we have, in that case too, we have a pretty good sample on the single-family detached. But townhouses, there were only 20 built since 2017 and only 20 condos, so we really don't have very good data. So we use this information primarily to adjust single-family detached slightly down. So we end up using 0.221 in our estimates for single-family townhouse and 0.258 for condos and apartments. The other factor we look at is the charter school enrollment. In some counties, charter schools are handling maybe 19–20% of the enrollments, and so they are able to help with the upcoming pressure. But here in Marion County, they add up about to 2% of total enrollment, so it's pretty insignificant right now. So there's not much relief from charter schools to accommodate future growth. And this chart is showing the enrollment trends of traditional schools, and you can see going back to 2009, and you can see that current enrollment is the highest since then. And this is showing the fluctuations in enrollment students added per year. You see the big dip during the pandemic, which is what most school districts experience, and then the district recover from that and continue to increase enrollment at a high level. So when we did the final estimates, we have some assumptions. We use fish capacity that's established by the Department of Education and is used by all school districts. We had the prototype sizes. We utilized long-range transportation plan distribution to distribute the population by attendance boundary of each school. And again, we could calculate it 2 different scenarios, 2,800 units and 3,500. Within each one, we have a low projection and high projection. And low projection looks at a countywide estimates when we need 1 full school on a countywide basis, how many schools we would need. High projection looks at the sub areas and tries to balance the use of portables in a more aggressive way, and it basically looks at if we need about half a school in those areas, it triggers construction of a school. So with the 3,500 units, we need altogether 7 to 10 schools. We are estimating that over the 15-year period. And with 2,800 units, it only decreases by 1, 6 to 9. So no matter what we do, those are the minimum amount of schools that seem to be needed to accommodate the growth. This is showing the elementary school existing conditions, and the colors is the red means there's no capacity available, permanent capacity. Orange is 90 to 100% utilization, so there's about 10% capacity. Yellow is about 80 to 90% utilization. Greens is 70 or better. So you can see even without any additional growth, there's quite a bit of areas that are orange or red that are touching each other. So, you know, if you have a situation where one zone is red, one next to it there's a green zone, there's like a small redistricting that can take care of it. But when you have big groups like that, it's really hard to redistrict through, you know, it's a lot larger scale if that's the choice. So overall, elementary schools, there are about 29 of them right now. And that's with 850 kids in portables. So we are estimating maybe 5 to 6 schools. And at the end of the 15-year period, under the low scenario, it would still have a shortage, almost needing 1 more school right after the 16th year or 17th year. Under the high scenario, there's a little bit more room. But again, the kids in portables is still increasing. Middle schools, they have better conditions. There are about 665 permanent capacity and 600 students on portables. And again, that's the challenge of school planning. where the capacity is and where the need is, those don't always align. So we are estimating 1 to 2 school needs over the 15-year period, and that would have either a relatively smaller increase in portables, or actually we will not need any portables if we are able to build 2 schools. High schools, again, there's almost no permanent capacity left, and about 1,000 kids are already in portables. And under the low scenario, we would need one school, but that would double the kids in portables. And then if we have 2 high schools built during the 15-year period, that would reduce the kids in portables, so there'd be a better balancing. So again, just summarizing, with 3,500 units, under the low scenario, we would have 7 schools, 5 of them being elementary, 1 middle, 1 high. Under the high scenario, that would increase to 10 schools with 6 elementary, 2 middle, and 2 high. Again, we tested that against 2,800 units, if that was the actual development levels, and it decreasing the needed schools by 1, so it'd be 6 to 9 schools. We then looked at how much these schools are likely to cost. So of all the infrastructure local governments provide, transportation and schools make up 70 to 85% of the value. So they are the most expensive, those 2 are the most expensive infrastructure. In our cost estimates, we reviewed the estimates by this district. We look at the insurance values of the existing schools. We obtain cost information from other districts and also talk with architects. So we basically estimated elementary schools at around 44 million, middle at 60 million, and high school at 135 million. So in total, with the 3,500 units, if all the 7 to 10 schools were to be built, that's likely to cost about 413 million to 652 million. With the 2,800 scenario, that's 370 million to about 592 million. And these are, of course, long-range plan is building new schools, but you'll see another scenario where there's wing additions and so on, which is helping moderate some of this cost somewhat. So as far as the funding sources, current funding sources available to the districts are capital millage and state contributions. And state contributions have been declining over time. And the available sources even already are not sufficient to basically address or fund all the maintenance and replacement needs. So really there's not much funding available for new construction unless district falls even further behind on maintenance of the existing buildings. So there's really no money left for new additional capacity. So the potential revenue sources, of course, school impact fees, and then the other one is the surtax. Of course, it requires voter approval. There are about 30 counties that have the school capital surtax. You kind of can see it here. So if the school impact fees were adopted at 100%, they could potentially balance the needs of the new schools. If they are subject to the 50% cap, then there will be still a significant gap in terms of funding that will require additional funding source. And then the surtax is estimated to generate about 562 million, and that will help both the new construction and the maintenance needs. Okay. Oh, so I think they said they divided in, okay. So far, this completes the long-range plan portion of the study. Before I move on to impact fees, would you like me to stop?
Yeah, I just had one question, and I had asked the members of the school board as I've talked to them individually, but, and Diane Gullett, but have we looked in any serious way in terms of leasing schools? Is that part of the solution, or is that off the table, or what?
I think when Barb gets into her presentation and explains some of the other options, she can address better. But there are strict guidelines of what the school buildings, the standards, like the codes that school buildings have to be built to by the state. So it's not possible to necessarily lease any available, like a building that is not built up to that standard. So that creates a challenge. But I think she'll be able to answer that question better.
So the lease schools, the standards are less? They don't build the schools to the standards?
So typically school districts don't lease schools, but for example, charter schools can be built to much simpler standards, like a normal, ordinary buildings. You can even take a existing commercial building, convert it into a charter school, but the schools owned by school districts have to be built to much more strict codes. So that also adds to the cost of building those schools.
Okay. Any other questions on this block that we just saw?
We've seen it before. Right. I think this is our 6th time,
They,
maybe.
Yeah,
they
I know.
memorized it.
You could teach it.
Thank you.
Anybody on our side, commission? Okay, all right, Michelle?
Well, I'm just thinking, I don't know if it's premature to ask at this point in time, but the options that are available for funding, those dollars that it would generate, has any sort of timeline been put together of if bonding were considered at this point in time, how much that could produce and how much could be accomplished with those funds? So is that something that we'll get to a little later? Okay, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Stone.
Okay.
Yeah, she has
Thank
all
you.
the answers to the.
Okay. All right,
I'm
so
not
I
sure
guess
how
we'll
to
move
get to
into
the
the
next- Get to the next presentation.
facilities update.
Okay.
Good point.
Impact fee section. Little bit background, as you know, impact fees were last updated in 2006 and they've been suspended. And the purpose of the study is to reflect most recent data, and that also a legal requirement. In terms of impact fees, they are one-time capital charge to new development. They cover the cost of new capital facilities. They cannot be directly used for maintenance and renovations, but they free up general tax dollars for those. Their primary purpose is to maintain the level of service. They calculate the cost of growth, and they are most needed when there's high growth levels and limited alternative funding. In the study, we are using a consumption-based methodology, which is very common in Florida. It charges new growth based on the value of the school infrastructure is using. And fees are calculated at a rate that they cannot correct existing deficiencies. And that's one of the requirements that, you know, they are not at a level to generate high enough revenues to correct existing deficiencies. The basic impact fee formula looks at cost to provide the school infrastructure, so that's primarily the buildings, schools, and we look at how the school district is funding that capacity, and to the extent that capital millage or other revenues are used, a portion will come from future development. So we subtract that from the cost, and then that net cost is multiplied by demand, which is the students per housing unit. In Florida, for the most part, impact fees were governed by case law, and then in 2006, we had the Impact Fee Act passed, and it's been revised since then. But some of its more important, I guess, requirements is that the fees be based on most recent and localized data. There's a minimum of 90-day notice for any fee increases. If there's a challenge, the government has the burden of proof. And then in 2021, we had some restrictions were placed. So the fees, if the fees are increasing up to 25%, they need to be phased over 2 years. If they are increasing up to 50%, it has to be over 4 years, and they cannot be increased more than once every 4 years. You can always decrease them, but once they are set, they cannot be increased for another 4 years. There's an exception clause if there's a study showing that there are extraordinary circumstances, and 2 public workshops held to discuss these circumstances. And finally, If the increase is approved by 2/3 of the governing body, it can exceed the 50% limit. One other thing in the legislation that allows you now, and that's also recent, that passed in 2019, is that local governments can reduce the fees for affordable or workforce housing, qualified affordable and workforce housing, without having to backfill or without having to decrease fees for other regular homes. So that's a tool available for, again, qualified affordable and workforce housing. In terms of the findings, just to give you a summary, cost per student compared to 2006 study increased, and that increases the fee. Credit, that just says other available revenue sources, decreased, so that also increases the fee. Demand for single-family student generation rate decreased, so that decreases the fee. So overall impact was an increase between all these changes. And there are several components. I'll go through them. We start with the inventory of traditional schools. We are not including charter schools, private schools, just the schools that school district is responsible for, and there are 49 of them. The costs are meant to reflect full cost of building these schools, construction, architectural design, land, site improvements, and so on. So to estimate that, again, we looked at any data available from the school district. We supplemented that with data from other jurisdictions. We talked to the architects. Basically, total facility costs with everything, land, buildings, furniture, fixture, equipment, ended up being about $40,000 to $67,000 per station. Now, Florida Department of Education placed some caps on how much the districts can build student stations for certain elements. They don't necessarily include in their cost estimate land purchase, any of the safety requirements, recent safety requirements, hurricane hardening, those things. So when we add those type of costs back, that $40,000 to $67,000 goes down to $32,000 to $45,000. So that's like about 35% decrease. So this kind of makes the fee pretty conservative. Now, DOE sort of paused that requirement this year because they were hearing so much from school districts that, you know, they can't stay within those limits given the cost increases that we are all seeing, and they are going to revisit their the CPI, the indexing value. They realize that CPI is not really reflecting what's happening in the construction industry. But nevertheless, for the fee purposes, we use that lower amount because we don't know what's going to happen after they go through that period of pausing. We then take that cost per station and convert it to cost per student. For that, we look at the enrollment to capacity ratios. So there's about, on a countywide basis, 8% available capacity in elementary schools, 4% in middle, and 2% in high schools. So technically, if the district had a policy of always providing that additional capacity for operational purposes, we could charge for it. But the level of service standard was really more one station per student, so we don't really increase the cost, and the cost per station ends up being cost per student as well. So overall, it's about $36,000 per student. Some of the other costs are transportation costs. These are the buses primarily, and then ancillary facilities, the maintenance buildings, administrative buildings. They are more minor. They are about $1,000 for transportation costs per student, and about $1,200 for ancillary facility costs per student. And then credits, again, is to recognize any future contributions from new development from other revenue sources. And if there's a debt service for capacity projects, we also recognize that. So overall, with all the components, total impact cost per student is about $38,600. That's the facility cost, transportation, and ancillary facilities. And then the credit is about $1,500. So the difference, the $37,000, is the net cost per student. Again, student generation rates, we went through it. It's the same process. The difference is for school impact fees, we do not include the age-restricted housing. They don't have an impact, and they don't pay the fee. for the planning purposes, since we don't know how many of the future housing units will be age restricted, we included all homes. So the generation rates end up being 0.28 for single family, 0.26 for multi, and 0.2 about for mobile home parks. And then the net cost multiplied by these generation rates gives us the final calculated fee. So it's about $10,700 for single family, and $9,700 for multifamily. And you can kind of see the suspended fee rates there as well. This slide and next slide shows what other jurisdictions are charging, and we try to show their study dates so you have a sense how old the data is. Adoption percentage, of course, that's a policy decision. The current rate, and then the calculated rate at 100%. So this is, this first slide is going from 2,500 to 7,800 per home. And then this next group is about 8,200 to 13,000. And we try to highlight, put them in blue font, the surrounding counties. So like Lake County recently updated their fees, and they adopted 100%, but they are phasing it over 4 years per the recent requirements. So it will become 9,700 in October, and then it will increase to 12,000 over the end of the 4 years. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, or maybe next presenter.
Any questions? Mr. Stone?
Thank you. Just a point of clarification, Ms. Camp, did you say that in the projections, all houses in the future were projected not taking into consideration any age-restricted communities?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll move into staff facility recommendations. Barbara Dobbins, Executive Director, Operations and Emergency Management for the school system.
Good morning, Dr. Chair Campbell, board members, Superintendent Dr. Gullett, Chair Curry, and County Commissioners. I'm being told that this is the supplemental packet if you're reviewing this online. I would like to begin by providing an overview of Marion County Public Schools facilities. Marion County, across our entire county, has 607 buildings. Of those buildings, we have 50 schools. Of those 50 schools, 74% of our schools are over 30 years old. 50% of our schools, so 25 of our schools, are built prior to 1977, which means in a few years they will be over or at 50 years old. We also utilize 417 portables across our district. I'd like to point out that when we're discussing portables, also known as relocatables, we are only allowed to use the capacity of that portable if that portable is 20 years or less. So when that portable reaches the age of 20, it can no longer count toward our capacity for student stations. In 2 years, 2025, all 417 of our portables will be at that point where they no longer will be counted toward our school capacity because of their age. Our maintenance department covers 7.1 square footage of building space to maintain. They maintain 18 water wells and 15 sewer plants, over 3,800 HVAC units, and they complete 24,000 work orders a year. As you can see, we have a tremendous amount of space, building space that we maintain, along with a high percentage of aging schools that cost us to maintain as well. This slide is from the Benish study, and what I want to point out on this slide is the dark black line running from top to bottom would be 441. The dark black line running right to left would be State Road 40. If you look at the gold circles, this would be the residential units projected from 0 to 5 years out. The green squares would be residentials 6 to 10 years out. And the blue diamonds would be 10 plus years. And you'll notice that there is a dark purple section running across the screen. And in this area, it is the population change projected out to 2045, which is 22 years from now. And that change is estimated as high as almost 44,000 new residents in that dark purple area alone. When the school district studied the tool of the Benesh study, we looked at the slide carefully, but we also want to point out that we have to look at the district and the county holistically. So not only do we have to consider the Benesh study in the high-density area, we have to look at those areas outside of that dark purple and look at the low-density areas, and then also look at our aging schools and come up with a plan. In preparation for the anticipated growth, our county, Marion County Public Schools, did purchase several parcels of land for future school sites. As you can see on your screen, these are the school sites locations we have purchased that would build 7 new schools in our district. All but one of those sites is located in the high-density area that was in that dark purple and just slightly under that dark purple in the southwest quadrant of our county. On the next several slides, what I would like to do is take the study and combine at the elementary, middle, and high school level what the recommendation range was from Benesh, and then where Marion County Public Schools makes their recommendations. Before I do, I just want to point out, if you look under units per year, I just want to remind you that the 2,800 units per year is from the average permits from 1990 to 2017. The 3,500 units per year is the average from 2017 to 2021. When we talk about the low average, we're talking about using more portables, and the high scenarios would bring in less portables. So when we look at elementary schools in the next 5 years, when we took the study, the average was from 0 to 3 schools in the next 5 years. Marion County Public Schools recommends that we would handle this growth by building 2 new schools, elementary schools, in the next 5 years, and add 2 additional wings to 2 separate elementary schools to handle the growth. When we look at elementary schools 6 to 10 years out, the study recommended 1 to 2 elementary schools during this time frame, and at this time we are recommending another additional 2 wings. I would like to remind everyone, though, that we would need to reassess and reassess frequently as we move forward in the future, not only looking at the study, but also our holistic needs across the district. When we look 11 plus years out, the study recommended another elementary school at this time frame, and they recommended 2 to 3 schools at this time range, and our recommendation in year 11 through 15 would be add another new elementary schools. So in total, Benesh recommended 4 to 6 elementary schools. We would, over the next 15 years, add 3 schools and 4 wings. For middle school, in the next 5 years, the recommendation was 0 to 1 middle schools. In the next 5 years, the district recommendations is to build 2 wings to 2 different middle schools. In years 6 to 10, the recommendation was 0 middle schools, and our recommendation as well is 0 middle schools, again reminding we would reassess. And then from 11 to 15 years out, the study recommendation was ranged from 0 to 1 middle school, and our recommendation is 1 more middle school. So in the next 15 years, Benesh's range was 1 to 2 new middle schools. Our recommendation at this time would be 1 school and 2 wings to address the middle school need. For high schools, the range for the next 5 years was 0 to 1 high schools, and our recommendation from the district would be 1 high school in the next 5 years. In the 6 to 10 range, the study recommended 0 to 1 high schools. We would have an additional of 3 wings to address. And then in years 11 to 15, the recommendation was 0 to 1 high schools, and our recommendation is 0 at this time prior to reassessment. So overall, for high school, the study recommended 1 to 2 high schools. Our recommendation from the district at this time is 1 school and 3 wings. So to summarize those recommendations for school facilities, in the next 5 years, if you take all of the recommendations that we just reviewed, we're looking at a total of $215.2 million worth of new construction for our schools. In years 6 through 15, we're looking at 42.3 for the 6 to 10 year mark, and then from the 11 to 15 year mark, we're looking at 108.7. But as I spoke about before, we have to look holistically at our needs across the district and other areas where we see growth and we have needs, such as a replacement middle school. Those would come in at $100.2 million. For school needs, when you add the 15 years together, it comes up to $466.4 million worth of new construction. For the summary of the entire facility plan, taking into consideration not only school needs, we are also in the process of building a new technology data center. For the data center, this project is needed because our current infrastructure of fiber optics and T1 trunk lines currently runs into the building that is our former district office, which is now closed. So we have to relocate those data center points, plug-in points to a new facility. That, because it is a district project and it's not a school, is required to come out of our capital outlay. But you can see the new construction from 24-28, and you can see the date that we anticipate to open these schools and wings and how we intend to fund them. The second section is new construction from year 29 to 33, and then the third section is new construction from 34 to 38. The bottom is the district 5-year facility work plan in regards to unfunded maintenance. It is estimated that between now and 5 years out, we will have almost $300 million worth of unfunded maintenance. And for the next 15 years, 336 for a combination of $633.8 million. When you add the new construction for schools, the new construction based on high density, based on replacement cost for schools, and lower density, and when you add the unfunded maintenance that we're currently experiencing, it does come up to be $1.1 billion. At this time, I will turn it over to our CFO, Ms. Boston Ellis.
Anybody have any questions? Hey, we just spent $1 billion. There's got to be a question.
Would you like me,
Our CFO is coming to help us with that.
would you like me to answer your previous question?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
I
I'm
do have a
sorry.
question. So I know I asked you this question, I think, when we met, but I still don't understand the portable piece of it and the temporary versus permanent threshold and what that takes. And we even had another attorney opinion that said maybe it could be counted as permanent classroom stations. And so I just was curious
State
in the
required?
future,
Yes, sir.
how that would work.
Yes, sir, sorry.
If you'll be able to, make those into permanent opportunities, or if they just have to be replaced, then you can count them after 20 years.
Yes, sir. Sorry to interrupt also.
Oh, no worries.
So state requirements for education facilities does not allow us to count a portable that is 20 years or older as a seat capacity station for students. So we either continue to use them and lose the capacity, or we plan to replace them. So some of the ones you see in this plan that talks about the low density and replacement is exactly that. We have schools with 16 portables that are over 20 years old, and we have to plan for the replacement of those portables.
Okay, so you can replace them and get the numbers
Correct.
back. Okay,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you.
And
Okay,
to,
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
And with that, Ms. Dobbins, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a rough estimate of the cost of a new portable in addition to the moving of a portable. And I know we're incurring that right now because we have shifted some of our portables that the district does own to Liberty Middle School and some other, to try to alleviate some of this overcrowding. Can you give us some cost estimates on that, please?
yes, ma'am. So currently, we are leasing 18 portables for this current year at the cost of setup, and we have to prepay for the removal of that portable when we decide not to use it. So that cost is there even though we haven't utilized that. And then the monthly cost for those portables for this year's startup, it is $1.7 million. It does go down because the second year of leasing, we've already installed it, so that yearly price will go down. As far as purchasing a portable, they range anywhere from $60,000 on up. If we choose to move a portable across our district from one school that doesn't have a need for it anymore to another school based on distance and so forth, it's an average of about $18,000.
So,
Yeah.
so do you know
Mr.
what the lifetime cost per seat is for then a portable? So for I mean, a building, you're putting what, a 50-year life on it?
I don't have that off the top of my
Okay.
head.
Thank you.
I don't have an exact figure, but whenever we compare in other districts, over a 50-year, they're actually more expensive if you are leasing them.
That's what I was trying to figure
Yeah,
out.
you have to replace them, and then you have to bring all the data lines. It's inefficient. It's usually a temporary solution when to balance them between, until you build the permanent capacity. And they will always use portables. It's not possible to perfectly plan, where the kids are going to show up. But the longer they use it, it gets actually more expensive, I think.
Thank you.
Yes, we did do a cost analysis. Our breakthrough point is 4 years. So if
Okay.
we don't want to lease a portable for more than 4 years. The current portables we are leasing this year, we strategically placed at the schools where we knew we would be building wings and therefore could remove them.
Oh,
I'd
I
also
appreciate that.
like to address, Chair Curry, your question about leasing. So we've held many meetings in regards to looking at leasing for school buildings, and we continue to explore that option.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Chairman.
No? Okay,
Thank you.
great, thank you. Okay, Dr. Campbell?
Our CFO, Ms. Boston Ellis, to continue with this presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You were smiling coming in, you gotta know something.
It's because I saw you, and you were smiling at me.
Oh, my goodness.
Look at her.
She knows how to butter the roll.
Money bags.
Well, good morning. Always glad for an opportunity to share information about funding for public schools. During one of our board work sessions this week, we went over all of our different funding sources in terms of capital projects, and we love to provide historical information on our capital funding, because you may recall, we did have impact fees back in 2006, 2007, and so we just wanted to share the history of those collections. And there was 3 different categories ranging from single family to multifamily to mobile homes. And then every year, according to the ordinance, we were allowed to go back and do some kind of an indexing based on CPI, the cost of construction. So you see an increase in the actual collection fees over several years. And then we all aware of what happened in our economy. And at that point, our board made the decision that our recommendation would be to suspend our requests to you, the Board of County Commissioners, for the impact fees. So that is the history of the impact fees for Marion County Public Schools. This slide basically provides the revenue that was generated with the impact fees. You can see it was a total of $12 million. And on the right were the expenditures that we incurred based on the requirements of the impact fee. You all know that it's based on growth necessitated. So all of those areas and all of those expenditures are tied into growth. The different properties, Ms. Dobbins provided to you a little earlier, those were the sites, and that's what we purchased those sites with, the impact fee dollars. I would point out to you, someone brought up about that the study included all building. We did have to refund Stonecrest because they were a 55 restricted age. So that does occur, and we do correct the errors that we are made aware of. And those are our slides in terms of history of the impact fee. Are there any questions on that?
Question? I know y'all don't have any questions. Oh, you do have a question. Is her,
Yes, we have brought with us, because that is a large endeavor for our school district in terms of debt. We have asked our financial advisor team, Ms. Laura Howe, as well as our bond counsel, Mr. George Smith, to come and participate in this conversation and answer the hard questions that you may have in terms of what that debt looks like. If you want to address that now.
A
Yeah.
good idea to me.
go ahead.
Yes? Okay, Ms. Laura Howe, if you'll come forth.
Commissioner Bryant, did you have a question? No? Okay.
Hi, good morning. My name is Laura Howe. I am with PFM Financial Advisors, and we're a financial advisor for the school district. And so I know that there was several questions about bonding capacity and how this all works, and so I'm here to address any of those questions this morning.
Okay, I'll start. Everybody else being shy. So can you just go over what the current bonding capacity of the school is without looking at impact fee revenue, future sales? I mean, just what it is today?
Sure. So currently, right now, using the 1.5 mils, which is the main revenue source for the district, they would have about $306 million of capacity over a 20-year issuance, which is pretty standard for how long we would go out for school districts for 20-year bond issuance.
How much was that again?
Is that using all of the capacity of that millage rate, or?
You're legally only allowed to go up to 75%. Rating agencies and additional needs within the district, this is run at 50%, which then would allow additional, it's minimal capacity down the road. But that amount was the 306.8 million.
At 50%?
Yes.
Okay.
But out of that, if I remember from my meeting that I had with Ms. Dobbins, how much of that is already, for lack of a better way of saying it, spoken for? Ms. Dobbins, I think you have that information.
Yeah, it's
Did you guys get
Yeah.
this piece?
I see that.
So if you're looking at this currently,
Oh, we don't.
oh,
No.
So I think what you're
I'm sorry,
talking about is the
Ms.
capital outlay. Just say currently for the 23-24 year, we're anticipating about 50 million. About half of that is already obligated between making current debt payments, also our property insurance, as well as transferring a certain portion of that over to the general fund to help with maintenance. And then, of course, we have the bus lease payment that we're also paying on. 2019, we did a lease purchase for 150 buses, so we also have that debt as well. So our debt payments come out of capital outlay dollars. I think that's what you're referring to.
Well, my question is out of that capacity that you have, how much of it is not already obligated?
About the 306.
Yeah, so I think for the 306, my understanding is the school board has already identified the projects that they would like to move forward with. So there's the deferred maintenance needs that are being identified as well. And it's all, what we look at is what can be spent within 3 years. For IRS regulations, you have to reasonably assume these dollars are going to be spent within 3 years. So the projects that are being looked at would be accomplished and completed within 3 years. And so I think that this was just passed around, this one sheeter. The top 4 schools in the 24 to 28 program are the new capacity that's on there. And then the remaining dollars are all deferred maintenance needs that are coming through. So, and that's where the conversation, I know there's a lot of talk about the different source of revenues. We have looked at all of those for the school district. Currently, that 306 is saying to build new construction. If impact fees are, pushed through, we would use those impact fees to offset as much of that, so then the other dollars could be used for additional deferred maintenance moving forward.
That's what I just wanted to make sure we were making very clear, was out of the bonding capacity that you have, it's all spoken for.
Correct.
Spoken for with the new schools
And
and
deferred
additional
maintenance.
wings.
Yes.
Being added in the 24-28 navy blue box.
So there's 2 new elementary schools, the one wing at Liberty Middle and the one wing at the Horizon Academy, Marion Oaks Middle. Those would be included in that money, and then the rest would be deferred maintenance. And if you look, the estimated deferred maintenance just through the next 5 years alone is $297 million, which is basically the capacity that they have right now with the 1.5 mils to issue. So
it's not going to meet the needs.
correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
what does it look
Commissioner.
like with impact fees?
Well, it depends. We haven't.
Of course. but
Yeah, so I mean,
There's a range, I'm sure.
as much that's come through, we haven't actually dove into those numbers because there's been so much discussion and there's, a lot of conversation to be had. So until we have actual numbers, we haven't gone into that. There would be the offset, and I have that back on my computer that I can pull. It would help significantly, but there would still be a gap that we would be looking at, either deferred maintenance, or I know the school board has talked about the potential for the sales surtax at some point, which is a conversation as well. And I have the numbers even with the surtax passed and the 1.5 mils where the deficit falls with that. And so once a decision's been made on the impact fees, we can crunch the numbers and see where everything shakes out for the district. But until that's been made, it's kind of putting the cart
Do you at
before
least
the
know where
horse.
it's at for 50% or 100%?
No,
Any one of
because
those numbers?
it's, no.
Nothing?
If I can, in the study that was presented, there is a slide that shows the potential adoption at 100%, plus a sales tax, plus the bond capacity. Is there a way we could pull that slide back up, or know what slide it is in the packet? Because that, I believe, is a slide that was referenced. Because I think
be
that's
the
what you're
numbers.
getting at, Commissioners.
Yeah, there's got to be a number somewhere.
It is, it's at an adoption at 100%, but it
Yeah.
was included.
We estimated approximately 560 million over the next 5 years if the fees were adopted at 100%, next 15 years, excuse me.
15
If the
years.
15 years, the entire 15-year period, if the fees were adopted at 100%. And depending the exact cost, it would either cover it or it would be slightly shortfall. If it was capped by House, like this recent 50% limit, then it would be significantly, it would be about half of that amount. So it would
Yeah.
That's what I was just trying to get a ballpark. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Where do we go now?
Thank you, Ms. Howe.
You got any follow-up?
Sure. So first of all, thank you, Commissioner Zalek, for asking a bit about where we're heading with this, because as Ms. Howe just explained, the purpose of what we're here today is to talk about impact fees. And while certainly there's a plan in place, depending on what the conversation is today, will dictate where the conversation goes beyond today. And so we understand, we do have a plan in place. Our advisor and our bond attorney are here to validate that we have a plan, but without knowing where we land today and the conversation, collaboration, and discussion we'll have today, it's difficult to forecast where we might land with future conversations. So before you, commissioners, I know that due to publication deadlines, as we all understand, that the school board actually had agreed and come to consensus on a certain tiered approach. And as early as this week, even last week, we started talking about this a bit, but as early as this week, we have also now come to consensus, and through the drafting with our school board attorney, Jeremy Powers, come with a new proposal. So this is different than what was originally published, and so if you're following online, it is now the supplemental information. And also in that supplemental information is one document on page 26 that just does show a complete timeline of where we were with impact fees and how many times these two elected bodies have spoken about impact fees since 2006, if anybody has information or questions about that specifically. But the new recommendations, and I know that School Board Attorney Jeremy Powers and County Attorney Guy Mentor had worked together on a lot of the cleanup language of this draft ordinance. And so all of that had already been worked out prior to this week. And so all of that cleanup language, definitions, new dates, all of that has been adjusted. Both of our attorneys have collaborated on that. What you have before you today is the new draft, effective, I believe you all received it via email yesterday as well, but it's also included as the supplemental. The items indicated in yellow are where the school district has come to consensus that we would like to request of the county for our conversation today. Take into consideration all that Benesh has done and the considerations of our community. We did hold the 2 public workshops talking with our community about the concerns and understanding that we do meet the extraordinary circumstances at this juncture, while understanding the legislature did make some changes to how impact fees can be administered. We do meet extraordinary circumstances, understanding that study has now been completed. We've held 2 public workshops. We haven't collected since 2011. All of those factors we have met. And so we, as a school board, are coming to you today asking for those fees to be calculated and for those fees to be received at 40% of the recommended calculation that Benesh has set forth for us. And so that is what you have before you today, and what we can have discussion and hopefully communication and collaboration on. And our hope is that we can land somewhere today where we can get this process started and hopefully have something on a future county commission agenda and move forward with this, understanding this is just one step in the process. The last thing I'll say is we're certainly grateful. Starting in 2021, I know we started having municipality joint meetings again, and knowing that the interlocal agreement had not been updated in more than a decade, that also was extensive work that was done with these 2 bodies and other municipalities in this county. And that took about a year for us to get moving on as well, understanding that that interlocal agreement was just the starting point, and knowing that once our studies were complete, that we would be coming back with this information, and that's what we're here doing today. So I don't know if our school board attorney has anything to add. I think I pretty much covered everything, but that's what we're here today, to hopefully have this discussion and collaboration with the county, understanding that our school board is making a request at 40% of what the 100% that Benesh has recommended.
I have one question. On the tiered approach, excluding multifamily, it was generating $31 million.
Can I?
And then another 20 million when you added multifamily in. The question is with the 40% as opposed to the tiered, is that a push? I mean, what's the total generated revenue at 40?
If I may, since that was my recommendation to the board, that recommendation was created with numbers that did not exclude 55-plus housing. So when 55-plus housing was excluded, and it is only relying on the permits from the county and not the other local municipalities, the number is closer to $12 to $15 million. And that does not, and the 40% and the tiered approach generate close to the same amount of revenue. And again, this is 21-22 fiscal year projections from the county. So these aren't live numbers by any means, but we're looking at the 40% might generate a little bit more, but they're very comparable when you dig into the numbers.
And thank you for that question and for bringing up the 55-plus communities. And speaking with the property appraiser just last evening, several of us saw him. He did pull some data that said in 2021, 17% of all homes that went on the property tax rolls were in 55-plus communities, and then in 2022, it was 16%. So that number is decreasing. But he also told me that 59% of all homes that went on the property rolls last year, 59% are in the southwest quadrant. So those further validate, and that's straight from the property appraiser last night, those further validate the statistics and studies that we've
So the
put forward.
55-plus are excluded.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if I might, when you look at the tiered approach, the 55-plus homes are larger than the average home being built outside of the 55-plus community. So when you pulled the reason the number changed so drastically is because those top tiers, those numbers decreased significantly because the majority of the 55-plus homes live in those top 2 to 3 tiers. So when you exclude those numbers drop significantly, which means obviously the amount we're collecting is going to drop significantly.
Well, and if you look at what we've approved in the last several years, the majority of it is not 55-plus. I can't even think of 2 55-plus communities that we've approved.
On top of what the other municipalities have as well, which has not been taken into consideration at this point.
Mr. Powers, did you have any follow-up, or?
I do not, except to say in discussion, and this will be discussion that'll need to happen between Mr. Minter and myself also, there was some discussion that was noted regarding the 3 types of housing that have traditionally always been used, and the fact that there's the single family, the multifamily, and the mobile home. There was some discussion that within the Benish study, there was also some analysis of townhome as a separate category.
Right.
I believe that that it would produce a different student generation rate, but the sample size was quite low and may not be statistically valid. What we do have to do is, anytime when we are going to alter anything, really anything regarding an impact fee, we have to be able to support it with student generation rate data. And I would just have to rely on Benish's consultancy to be able to analyze that particular portion to see if that is a consideration which needs to be viewed as well. But standing as is, as presented so far to you today, everything is in keeping with what I've found to be appropriate, and of course I stand ready to work with Mr. Minter on executing anything that we need to in the future.
But townhomes still are in the residential
It's,
category?
right now, it hasn't been pulled out as a separate category for consideration at a separate rate. Like, for example, right now, each of those 3 categories that are there, they have a slightly different generation rate, or a slightly different rate that they're taxed at, and that's based on the student generation rate. In other words, the number of students that are found in each of those types of housing overall statistically as a population for the entire county. Any alteration to that, if we decided to subdivide, I'm just gonna make something up, if we subdivided mobile homes into 2 different types of mobile home structure, we'd have to just show that there was a different generation rate, student generation rate that was supported by the statistical data to show that that was a valid consideration. So I know there's been some discussion of that, so I just wanted to kind of tell you, one of the things that's been that I've worked on quite a bit over the past several days is looking at student generation rate data, and of course, that's what Benish does for a living, and they certainly can speak to this probably even greater or more than I can if the questions should arise.
Commissioner Stone?
In talking about the student generation rate, I think it was stated that Benish's study, though, did not pull out the student generation rate of the 55-plus housing. Would that need to be addressed in this study as well?
If I may clarify that, it was not pulled out for the long-range plan estimates. Because, again, we weren't sure how many of the new homes will be 55 and up. But for impact fee purposes, we did pull them out. And that really matters, because they don't have impact, and they don't pay the fee. So they were pulled out. And it's a very standard practice that age-restricted homes are not included in the student generation rate used for impact fee studies.
Right, but you are projecting how many schools you're going to need based on student generation rates.
Right, so if anything, it's actually moderating our estimates probably.
So to make sure that we're understanding, can you indicate that I think the question that she was asking was whether we are looking at the number of actual homes in trying to figure out how many schools we build, and we're including 55 there, the 55 communities, which I don't believe to be the case. Is that?
For the long-range plan, the generation rates we use in the long-range plan is including 55 and up. Again, with the idea that we don't know what's going to be built in the future. So if we subtracted them and they were built, it would skew it. But for impact fee purposes, which it's based on the existing student population, it's not a projection, it's excluding 55 and up.
Understood.
So if there is a challenge based on, I'm just trying to think of the legality of, are we projecting an overbuild if we are projecting more students? Could this set us up, and I say us, you, as a challenge to this study?
It's other way around, because if
Okay.
we subtracted age-restricted housing, the student generation rates that we would use in the plan would be higher, because the same number of students are being divided by fewer units. And that's exactly why we didn't do that, because we don't know. There will be some age-restricted homes coming along, and we don't want to treat them like they're going to generate students.
Correct.
So that's kind of the reason. It was a conservative approach from that perspective.
Thank you.
Is that, okay?
You're satisfied? Okay.
No, so that's
Okay.
the point. That's the reason why in making sure to calculate for those student generation rates, and making sure that it's done appropriately in keeping with the structure that she's talking about, ensures that it doesn't present a legal difficulty.
Thank you.
Commissioner Zalak, hold on just 1 second.
Yep. I just wanted to mention, Commissioner Stone, while I understand that the concern potentially is that the study may represent that we could be overbuilding. I know there was a couple of years ago that we all met, and we saw that it seemed as if, while we were in the height of COVID in the 2020-2021 school year, that our enrollment had either been flat or was even decreasing in that particular school year. Last year and even this year, we are not seeing that at all. As you know, several years ago, there was even a CEP magazine that called it the Silver Tsunami. Well, I just told you that the numbers of folks that are coming here are not in that 55 plus any longer. We know that that's the 30 to 40-year-olds that are the highest population that are coming to Marion County. And so we believe as a school district that these projections are actually very accurate for where we are right now, specifically in that southwest corridor, and understanding that as we will be potentially building these schools specifically in southwest and additionally the wings, it will require us to redistrict the entire county, which is not something that we have done in many, many years. We did a small redistricting in southwest to try to alleviate some of the pressure just for this school year. but that is still not alleviating much pressure, and we've had to add portables and things like that already. So I absolutely wanted to speak to that comment and question that you had, because we feel very comfortable with the information that Benesh has put forth, understanding where the future growth is coming to this county and where future development will occur.
Commissioner Zalak?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the, the different tiers. So when you look at it, mobile homes just produce a significantly less amount of children in the cases of your findings?
Mobile, let me double check something. I think what we have there is, yeah, that's mobile home park, not mobile home on individual lot. So mobile home parks are usually occupied by retirees. Usually you don't see as much families.
Okay.
So that's kind of why, probably.
So when you charge an impact fee under the proposed new draft of the ordinance, the mobile home fee will only be for those that are mobile homes in a park, not mobile homes on land?
Mobile home on land will be charged single-family rate.
Will be charged single family, okay.
Correct.
So I didn't understand that, and we need to make that, I don't know if that's clear.
That's a good point.
I think we should probably put single-family / mobile home on lot.
Okay,
But that's kind of, we did in one of our tables, but we may have not done it in every one of them, so that's probably,
I just think when we're reading this or interpreting this, or putting an interlocal agreement together with a city, or any of those things, the way we have it here may be a little unclear. And if we just intend to do mobile home parks in that, then maybe we should just say that.
Commissioner, the historical practice has been mobile homes in general, they are charged the lower fee.
Well, I don't think that's a good practice. You can
Yeah,
get
it
pretty
needs-
large mobile homes
It
these
needs to be-
days.
it
Well,
needs
I
to be
got a
clarified.
question, Mr.
Yeah, and
Chairman.
certainly on land, I'm sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
No, I say I concur with Commissioner Zalek, that is not clear if it's talking about a mobile home park or a mobile home on some property where, as Commissioner Bryant just said, you get a triple wide, and many people can be there, so I think we need to make that language clear.
just to provide little additional information on that.
Thank you.
And not that you are supposed to memorize our report, but table 7 of our report, we actually showed mobile home separately from mobile home park, and mobile home on lot, their generation rate 0.276. Mobile home park is 0.141. So there was a big difference. That's why we didn't
Right.
lump them, yeah.
But you also even call out condos, and we don't do that here either, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, I
just-
think we need to clarify it in the table, that's for sure, yeah.
okay.
Dr. James?
I just want to point out, when I got the updated numbers, subtracting the 55-plus community, again, just from the county, we had 4,614 single-family home permits alone in the 21-22 fiscal year. So to the point of our numbers being incredibly conservative, a 3,500 projection is far under that 4,600 number, and that is just 4,600 single-family homes in the county. That doesn't include any of the other local municipalities. So I'm just trying to draw awareness to the point that the projection is rather conservative.
Right. Your actually 22 total permitting is about 6,500 with the, so
Both the cities.
this average is kind of assuming things going to moderate somewhat, but early years are going to put a lot of pressure.
And if I may, that would, and the reason within the draft ordinance that the 3 categories of single-family detached, multifamily dwelling per dwelling unit, and mobile home per dwelling unit were used was because historically, that's what the previous ordinances all had gone with. So if we are either going to define and still keep those same 3 categories, but further define them within the text of the ordinance, or if we create different categories that have the generation rates for those particular items there, that will be the edit that we will need to make, either through definition of what we are calling, single-family detached, is that the trailer on a lot as opposed to a mobile home park? or by separately including a fourth and/or fifth category within there. Either way achieves the same goal in making sure that we're able to show what those are. But the latter would make it so that we are doing mobile home on a lot charged differently specifically than mobile home per dwelling unit as has been traditionally used in prior impact fees here. Because of the 5 or 6 proposals and final ones that have been done so far, it's always been those 3 categories. So I can speak with Mr. Minter, and of course you guys can have discussion on how you would like that to look. Would you like it to be pulled out as a separate category? Benish can tell us the practicality of that. Or alternatively, would you like it simply to be fixed within the definition?
Yeah.
What I hate about ordinances, is the fact that some of the details are in the definitions. I totally understand that from a legal perspective, but I think it makes them rather hard to read, right? You read this information, and unless you go back and index the definition, it doesn't make any sense. So for me, personally, I always like it when it's clear and defined as you read it. But that's just one person.
There is enough difference between mobile home park and mobile home. And mobile home on lot is so much closer to single family that I think the simple thing is sort of how we use it in this table, single family / mobile home park on lot. And then the mobile home park,
Being a
as a
different category.
separate category. And definitions, I think it will be easy
So that
enough.
would be a change in not the definition, but actually right there in the text as
Correct.
Mr. Zalek says.
In the
I think-
table.
As to item 2, the as to item 1, single family detached.
And that should be okay as long as you have the study to back up the data of the student generation, correct?
Right,
Yes.
if our research and data shows that is nearly identical generation rate, then it's simply a matter of defining it. And the simple way to define it is not to bury it within the text, but simply
Correct.
put it right there in that block that you have that's highlighted in yellow.
Yes,
For
sir.
single-family detached, and the language that Benish recommends there as to defining mobile home. And then mobile home per dwelling unit, which is the third one here, would then be relegated to mobile home park lot.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
Any
maybe-
last comments?
Sure, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
And maybe a better way of saying that is mobile home not within a park,
On page 107.
and then mobile home in a park.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Bryant. Page 171 of the information provided does give a table, maybe just lift it out and put it in exactly as that.
Right.
Which does specify it more specifically.
Yeah, table 9 that calls it out just like that, right?
Right.
Okay, now we're going to open it for public comments. We're going to try and limit the public comments to 3 minutes. So try and make your points. If you are continuing to make good points, then I'll work with you on that, but we need to have some limit.
Tracy?
So anyway, is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the panel regarding impact fees and what we've discussed this morning? Okay. Mr. Hanson. So you need name and address or just?
Name and address?
Yeah,
Yes.
Stan, we need your name and address.
Okay. Stan Hansen, 7074 Southeast 12th Circle, Ocala. I noticed the school board go, oh, no. I'm going to, it's really not directly on the impact fees. I'm going to go back to when you originally dropped them. And I remember speaking to the board, and I'm going to tell you the same thing again that I said then. That would be a great opportunity to look beyond doing minor steps and look at what kind of a big step could we take to run the school system differently and to run it financially and academically different than what we've been doing, because what we've been doing on results isn't working. And no one can convince me that it is. It isn't working. We're still remaining in the bottom. We were kind of told by the school board at a point in time, change to an appointed superintendent, and we'll be up in at least the middle of the school district. So we aren't doing that. And I'm not going to let you accept COVID as the reason. What I think you should have done back then is use that as an opportunity, and maybe now is a good opportunity to do the same thing, to look at a different operational model. Do an RFP and ask not-for-profit charter schools to come in and make a bid on how they would run the school academically and financially in a different model than we've ever used or that any school district in the whole state of Florida has ever used. A charter district, the whole district run with a charter model. And there's a lot of things you can do more flexibly with that model. A lot of the stuff on building requirements and sticking to that. There's a lot of exceptions that you don't have as a public school system that a charter district has. There are a lot of academic exceptions that a charter district would have that you don't have as a public system. So I would just ask you again for a third, fourth, fifth time, whatever it is, as long as I'm living, you're going to hear from me periodically that I think you need to evaluate a different operational model before you start looking at how to spend money in the traditional way, which is come and ask taxpayers for more money. Maybe you let the charter district determine if you need more money. Let them look at the whole system, financially and otherwise, whether you need impact fees and how much you need. Be a function of looking at a proposal that would tell you this is how we would run the system and this is how much money we would need to do it.
Dan, I'm gonna need your address, sorry. Your address?
I did give the address.
You did?
Yeah. 7074 Southeast 12th Circle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right,
that's
thank
all
you.
I have to say.
Okay.
And
Thank
you
you.
will hear from me continually until Father takes me above.
Okay, we got you. Anyone else in the audience that would like to address? Yes, sir.
Good morning. Rob Batzel, 1531 Southeast 36th Avenue, Ocala. First of all, thank you all. You know, Mr. Curry, the way you started the meeting today was perfect. It set the tone. You all have already made a monumental undertaking. The reason we're here is a result of a whole lot of hard work. I don't want to diminish that. We appreciate it. It's long overdue, and you finally picked up the ball and did it, so thank you. As a developer's lawyer, I want to assure you that everybody here in this county, every one of my clients, or anyone who will ever be one of my clients, recognizes its obligation to pay their proportionate fair share of infrastructure and to invest in our schools. The families who move into their product want to send their kids to top flight schools, and they do already, but we're invested just like you are, and we appreciate you. My goal is to help to the extent I can to get it right. I don't want to go into detail on this, but I have a personal vendetta to never allow any governmental entity in my hometown ever do anything that would constitute an illegal revenue source again in my life, okay? And I hope you understand where I'm coming from. I want you to get this right. Impact fees are precarious. It is a process that must be highly detailed, as you all know. Banesh, you have a great group here supporting you. Ultimately, I know you don't want to listen to a lawyer talk about dual rational nexus. That is probably the worst thing that you could, worst use of your time this morning. However, we have to be very careful to make sure that the way that we're slicing this data, the definitions that we have in our code represent a clear, proportionate relationship between the amount paid and the benefit conferred. And I know you know that. I've spoken with Mr. Powers, and I appreciate that. I've spoken with Dr. James. I very much appreciate that. I'll continue to be involved in this. Today, I just want to raise a few quick things with the point that in order to get this right, we have to ensure not that the majority of it is correct or that our percentage works, but that there is not a single hole or flaw. And that's daunting. That keeps a school board attorney, a county attorney, a city attorney up at night. And so let me just point out a few things real quickly, if I may. By the way, some of the errors that Mr. Boudier's letter pointed out have been rectified, of course. So the change of position is much appreciated, and it's a real positive development. But this is going to be, I believe, an ongoing process. And I don't mean to say that there needs to be a significant delay. I know we're all trying to get this done. But the last thing we want to do is have something that's not fully baked. And so one thing that I want to draw your attention to, and generally speaking, I think you've already touched on it as it relates to mobile homes, the grouping of uses is problematic. Anytime we have two different types, and if we are assessing based on type, and there is an averaging taking place, whoever is on the lower end of that average is by definition overpaying. I'm gonna, in this case, townhomes, and Mr. Curry, I appreciate it, I'm just finish one thought if I may. Townhomes, A, are grouped in with single-family residential. I encourage you to look at that. They are drastically overpaying in the current structure. And additionally, in the ordinance that I'm looking at, the new draft today, the way that we are describing single-family residential, even though we intend to include townhomes, is limited to single-family detached. Townhomes are by definition attached. So townhomes, I believe, are not even covered by the existing draft, but also the data, I believe, needs to be cut a little cleaner to, if anything, maybe break out each individual type individually. Finally, I appreciate very much the approach to try to, from a policy standpoint, make sure we're not having unintended consequences by creating a tiered methodology. That is possible. So if we're going to be going back with Banesh and having another detailed discussion about what we may be able to do to improve this, Orange County, for example, has a tiered structure. I would very much encourage anyone to do that so that we don't have unforeseen consequences when it comes to workforce housing, which we drastically need. So thank you so much.
Could I ask you to follow up your comments to
I thought you were trying to kick me out,
county
sir.
attorney with, well, not comments, but maybe concisely putting those points in an email and sending them to Mr. Mentor?
I absolutely
If you
will.
don't mind.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank you.
Also, Chair, can you also send them to our attorney as
Yeah.
well?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're in trouble now. Name and address, see where you're living now.
Hello, David Tillman, Tillman Associates Engineering, also president of the Marion County Building Industry Association and board member of the Marion County Road Builders Association. My address is 3301 Southeast 41st Place, Ocala, Florida. Unlike Rob Batzel, I have plenty of clients as well as members of my organization that would be happy to pay zero on the impact fees and would argue to not pay them. However, I certainly do recognize that there is a need here with our school board. My organization as a whole recognizes that there's a need for our school board to raise this money, that there's a need in our community. But we certainly have an affordable housing crisis in our community. And when I say affordable housing crisis, I'm talking about our workforce housing, which includes our teachers in our community. And I'll say that, you know, the first proposal that came out with the tiered approach, which did give some equitable to the equation for affordable housing, it brought that forth and showed that we were looking at preserving affordable housing in our community. But the straight line approach is not what we want to see done. We would like to see it looked at as a dollar amount per square foot be adopted instead of a straight 40% that's being spoken about, because on the lower end homes, it's the same price whenever you're building 1,000 square feet as it is 1,000 square feet. And so we look at that as the larger homes have the potential typically to hold and house more children. You know, it's okay for you to charge them by the square foot, so that there is that potential. The affordable housing exemption that had been mentioned at some of the school board meetings, I'm not aware of it being done in the state anywhere, so I believe that brings us into a greater potential for legal challenges if we're writing new exemptions that haven't been done yet in the state. Maybe they have been done, but I haven't been able to find them. And also, I'd like to point out that the affordable housing criteria is typically done for a multifamily product, and we want to get people into their own homes. Their own homes are how they build wealth over generations, and so we want them to have the ability to get into an affordable house, not just affordable rental property. And those affordable rental properties are tied to like 20 years to 30 years of income tracking, that has to be monitored and kept. There are a lot of strings attached to it. It's not something that's that simple as just to say, oh, we labeled ourselves affordable housing and now we can get our impact fees waived. So it's complicated to get labeled that way and get tied to those programs. So it's not something that's very easy. The Live Local Act was also brought up, and that money is quite minuscule when you look at how much is doled out to each county, in our state, and it's not going to do much to make any type of impact. So I would not consider that to be something to cover any type of gap that gets
David,
created
can
by
you
adding.
Start wrapping it up.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So it's simply this. We're asking you to have the consultants, have the attorneys look at the option for a dollar amount per square foot to be an option that gets exercised and eventually adopted for this type of impact fee. We're not saying, we don't want to slow the school board down. We want them to be able to move forward. We know that they need the money to start building schools. So please look at this as an option and bring it back in front of this board. Right now, we're seeing the interest rates go up on a regular basis, and you lose about $10,000 of buying or purchasing power with every point in the interest rate. So we need to consider that, and adding an additional $4,000 of cost onto a 1,000 square foot house is pretty significant. So please keep that in mind, and we would ask that you would have that option looked at before adopting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to come before the commission? When you give me your name, we know where you live.
You do?
Sort of.
Thank you. Peter Lee, City Manager, City of Ocala, 110 Southeast Watula Avenue, and I'm there a lot. I don't sleep there, but I'm there a lot. Thank you. Thank you for all the hard work. Thank you to Banesh. Thank you to school board and the staff and county commission for having us today. It's a lot to digest. Our staff will need some time to discuss the impact of the options presented on the city and the development that's proposed and contemplated within the city. I'd recommend that we reconvene the technical working group, at least over the short term, to hopefully intensely, fully work through the complexities and consider all the housing types and solidify the definitions. Some of the things that Rob spoke to are considerations that concern me also. So that's our recommendation. We again, look forward to working as a part of that group and would welcome the opportunity. Thank you.
Hey, just a question.
Yes, sir.
If we did reassemble the technical working group, how much time, with time being of the essence, we've said that many times, how much time do you think that would take to, you talking about one meeting or?
Yeah, I think with what I've seen today, I think that you could get refinement within one meeting. It could be a long meeting, I would imagine, but I think that you could do it in one meeting. And I'd defer to the people on the working, on the technical committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Pete?
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, so what would be the point of reconvening the technical working group? We have all the information right here. You guys can have access to all the information. I mean, it's just a matter of your city council making a decision.
I think you need to solidify some of the definitions and some of the housing types and
Well, but I think that would be something that would be worked out between all of the attorneys from all of the different governmental organizations,
okay, well, we can.
right?
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
can
I'm just,
convene
and
that,
I'm not meaning
yes.
to be
No,
argumentative,
no,
I'm
no,
just
no.
trying to ask the question.
Yeah, any group, I think there needs to be a group, and I hope that we'd be included in that group that would decide
Well,
some of those
since
things.
you
and
have to be a part of this,
Yeah.
we can't move forward without the city agreeing, correct? You would absolutely have to be, I mean, we can't implement without the city without the municipalities being on board. Is that correct, Mr. Mentor?
That's correct.
Okay. So you would they would have to be a part of the conversation when it comes down to what that ordinance looks like and the language and the definitions within the ordinance, correct? He's saying yes.
Yes.
Well, it's an interlocal agreement, right?
Yeah.
Right, we already have an interlocal agreement on that aspect, and so it would be, I mean, that part of the interlocal agreement is, in advance, was already letting everyone know that we would be initiating studies regarding impact fees and that there would be future collection of those. So yes, we certainly welcome any input. One of the problems is that the more input you have of, well, what about carving out this category, and another category? Certainly some of them are, like we discussed today, perhaps necessary, and the data would support us being able to do so. And that is really a determination that needs to be made. The input is fine, but the determination needs to be made by the attorneys of the respective counsel for the respective parties to try to find out exactly how, whether that meets the requirements legally of being supported by the SGR data. Because if it doesn't, then that puts the entire agreement at risk and the entire impact fee at risk.
So my point is that they have the ability to give that input to the attorneys as far as definitions are concerned, and then your jobs would be to look at that to make sure that it would go along, did you say the SGR?
Right.
Student
generation
Thank
rate.
you.
Right.
All right,
More acronyms.
all right.
Dr. James, did you have a?
No, I'm okay.
James.
The interlocal.
Contemplating.
So, I would just speak to the technical working group. That is how the interlocal agreement was written. Whenever there would be changes, and the interlocal agreement committee, which is the technical working group, we all were under the understanding that we would be coming back together to hammer this out when the time comes. So then, and of course, the attorneys would be a part of that. Again, speaking to solidifying these definitions and making sure that we are all on the same page, and the municipalities, which all 5 municipalities should actually weigh in because they are part of the interlocal agreement.
But I don't think that necessarily means that you have to put off moving forward.
Correct.
That can all happen without putting this off.
Provided they get the input, but with all due respect, Commissioner, I do think that there's still some solidification of some things that need to be determined.
Well, absolutely, and that would happen between the time that this board says, or has the consensus, yes, to move forward, and the ordinance gets brought back before our board for a vote.
Which I don't know that you're gonna get consensus of that today.
Well, that's a shame.
As long as we have the opportunity to participate, whether it's the attorneys or the working group, that's fine with us. Thanks.
Vice Chair.
Commissioner.
Vice Chair.
Oh, I've been promoted.
Not really.
I hear you have a place available. Thank you, Chair, and I loved my time serving on the technical working group, and we accomplished a lot over a long period of time. And as I had pulled up our document in section 3.4 of our interlocal agreement, under impact fees, it's pretty simple, and it's simple for a reason, from what I remember, is that the school board may prepare an educational facilities impact fee study and recommend such impact fees be adopted by the local government, which adoption consent will not be unreasonably withheld. And I think that we can continue to go around and around and around and around, and the more input we get, the more ideas we're gonna get. And that part of this process so far has really been enjoyable. I think the outreach has happened. I think that all of the required transparency has more than happened. Our joint workshop last year, the same presentation was provided. The presentations have been provided, multiple times in public forums. So I don't see anything in this adopted interlocal agreement that requires that the technical working group put their blessing on what should be a very straightforward process. Yes, there's complications, but multiple counties, in fact, we're in the minority by not having impact fees. So I'm at the point where I'm ready to come to, if not a consensus today, a very clear and definite few next steps, and let's get this done.
Yes.
If I may add, I don't want to discredit what Mr. Lee shared. I believe that from this board member's perspective, our effort is not to not include the local other municipalities outside of the county. I think that how I envisioned this was collectively this group would come to consensus on our next steps, and then representatives from our side would go out to our local municipalities and build that bridge and have that conversation. But I do believe that if our county government, our local county government is on board and comes to consensus with our plan, I believe that we feel confident that we could reach and extend that arm to have those conversations with the local municipalities to close that gap. So I just want to, we're not trying to exclude the city, but I think the nature of how this has evolved has led us to be here today.
Come on up. If you give your name and address, and then I have a comment.
Thank you. Good morning. Reggie Boutier, 106 East College Avenue, here on behalf of On Top of the World Communities LLC and Cullen Built Development.
Yeah. You provided us with a letter, and the front page, it says to Chairman Curry, and then it's got Vice Chairman Michelle Stone and Carl Zalak, and the Honorable Kathy Bryant. I'm trying to figure out what's going on here.
You're killing me. That's what's going on. Thank you.
He might take that back.
Yeah.
Well, she is honorable, I'll say that. So.
You're all honorable. So first, I want to thank you for all the hard work that's been accomplished. I only have 3 minutes, so I can only thank you so much. And I really don't have time to go through any of my letter. I'm just going to try to do my best to provide some highlights in the short time that I have. So On Top of the World Communities in Cullen Built is been in this community for over 40 years. I've represented them for over 26 years, and they are the largest community developer in Marion County, and we happen to be in the southwest quadrant. I just thought it would be important to give you sort of some size and scope numbers. These are just broad. I don't have a lot of time. But we've been entitled, when I say entitled, I mean all of the permitting authority, all of our entitlements have been in place since the 1970s and 80s. And so, broadly speaking, we're entitled for almost 40,000 development units, of which approximately 32,000 units are retirement units. And we have developed within our retirement community approximately 12,000 units already to date. So many of you are familiar with Colessa Township, which is primarily not targeting retirement numbers. And so if you subtract, do the subtraction, 40,000 minus 32,000, we're sitting at approximately 8,000 non-retirement units that we can develop in the southwest quadrant. So one of the things I love about my client is we have a very caring person that is constantly really wanting to support and give back to our community. Client is a big believer in public schools and strongly supports our public school system. You probably see that we believe there's been a crisis. We've identified that crisis with our county commission over the last couple of years in opposing, which is unusual for me and my client, projects on our borders that were proposing increased density when we pointed out there was no school capacity. So the county commission responded to that, and I give them a lot of kudos. That's a hard thing to do, to basically say no in the face of a crisis. But I just wanted to point out that we've been really there in the trenches now for a couple years, and we appreciate the fact that you're doing the hard work that you're doing. It's not easy in a crisis. So with that, in the southwest quadrant, we obviously have a major deficit, and we very much support bringing in line new schools. And I think I put in the letter that my client is not opposed and supportive, which is unusual for a developer and a builder to say that, to bringing online or bringing back online impact fees. So I just want to put that, I put it in the letter, I want to make sure it's clear. We also want to make sure that what's put in place can uniformly be supported legally and technically, which I made clear, and I'm not going to go over really any of the points there because I don't have time, but what I want to talk about is process. One of the things in Florida that is challenging for school boards uniformly is you have all these obligations and you don't have a lot of authority to raise money. That's a huge problem. And I think what we're seeing in this process is exactly that, because impact fees requires coordination, it requires approval of the various local governments, and that makes it very challenging for the school board. And so does the half-penny sales tax. You just can't do that alone. And so what I'm trying to emphasize, or what we're trying to emphasize in the letter is, despite the crisis, and I think you've done a good job, but I think because it's such a big crisis and we need to move so quickly that sometimes the stress of that causes us to not overly communicate. And I think this is a great meeting right here, and I think if you take some of the comments and you start looking at what's legally required, we need to move quickly, and so I'm just gonna throw out some things. I agree with the county attorney that in order to implement impact fees universally countywide, you need to amend the interlocal agreement or have an interlocal agreement between the county and the local the other municipalities, in which those municipalities consent to the county collecting those impact fees. Without that, you can't collect impact fees within the municipal boundaries. And so we are very supportive of it being countywide, so everybody pays their fair share, and the school board can then collect those impact fees countywide. I heard a comment earlier, and this is just an example, and what I think I would request is that maybe the attorneys representing you spend more time educating you or spending just more time on the process, and maybe if they could get some consensus to be able to provide that input, that would be helpful. But I think the school board understands they've done 2 workshops and they're ready to go. Well, the statute requires that the local government, that is the county, do those workshops, not the school board. The school board can do those workshops, but before the county can even adopt an impact fee ordinance, they have to hold 2 separate workshops in order to adopt that ordinance. So I think we're very supportive of all of the local governments and the school board really moving quickly to collaboratively move an impact fee proposal together while at the same time continuing to exchange this very valuable information that we saw today, so people that are elected that report to their constituents can explain why they're doing what they're doing. Going to the impact fees, I very much appreciated both proposals from the school board, and we've taken both of those in, and we appreciate Banesh, our consultant, all the hard work they've done. I think where it would try to take what David Tillman said and maybe put words into actions, we would recommend that you would take your first proposal and combine it with your second, and let me explain that. There's been a lot of discussion about not aggregating land use or density categories like townhomes into single family. We can technically, with our expert team, work with your expert team, and in probably less than 2 weeks, come up with a legally and technically supportable way to break out unit types and also apply an across-the-board percentage. So it's really a combination of both. The only problem with the last proposal, which I commend Dr. James coming up with, is that you can't separately have different percentages for each unit type. You do have to have a percentage that goes across the board, which is why I think you came back and proposed that. So I would recommend, or we would recommend, in 2 weeks or less, let's come back with a blend that we can agree is legally and technically supportable. And I think it is good wisdom. I don't want to say it's a technical group. Whatever it is, I think that there needs to be a lot more coordination between the school board, the county, and the local governments, so you can set the stage for amending that interlocal to go to the next level and get everybody on board so you can implement impact fees. So with all that said, because I don't have a lot of time, we are a big proponent of the half-penny sales tax. I mean, we're going to do everything we can to push that. I know there's been controversial discussion because we're also a big proponent of the penny extension in 2024. We're very much behind the need in Marion County to improve our roads and our public safety. It's got to happen. We got to extend that. And that's kind of an elephant in the room. I know it's a hard discussion, but I would just ask you to start working on it now because it's 2023. We're almost in 2024, and before you know it, we're going to be in 2025. So I think we've got to really tackle that hard issue. I think the Manesh study certainly supports over $500 million that could come from that effort. I think it's a must. The client think it's a must. We'll do what we can to get behind it. So we're here to support. We appreciate all the effort, and we will be ready to go if you want to use some of our resources to help get you there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your help. Anyone else in the audience that would like to address the panel? Anybody? Tom Fisher, you coming? Good morning. Give me your name and address.
Tom Fisher, 5393 Southwest 85th Street, Ocala, Florida, 34476. You know, I don't like, well, first off, let me say that this process should have taken place years ago. But I'm glad to see we're finally doing something now. I think I really feel insulted when I'm asked to go to support a penny sales tax, and you haven't used an available resource that's available, and that upsets me. And what I'm hearing is, to the benefit of the developers, they want all of us to pay for that. And that's my problem. I think that growth won't pay for itself completely, but this is a way, this is a source that's available to us that we haven't taken advantage of. And that's where I'm at.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else that wants to address the board?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Let's see, Guy, Metro County Attorney. So I have some thoughts after hearing the comments today, the revised package from the school board, Mr. Boutier's letter. I have a parable for the board. I recognize what Ms. Thrower's comment was regarding the technical group will not be withheld unreasonably. So my parable is a man was having what he thought was upset stomach, and over time he waited, and over time it gradually got worse and worse, and eventually he decided, man, now I've got an emergency, I need to speed to the hospital. But unfortunately he had a wreck on the way to the hospital because he was speeding. And so my point is that it's unfortunate if you delayed up until today, until you have an emergency, but you still have to make sure that you respond to that emergency in an appropriate manner. And I think with respect to issues that potentially could be a source of invalidating the ordinance, we do have to pay attention to that. Regarding Jeremy and I and our communications on this early on, I had sent the first draft to our bond counsel, who's with Neighbors Giblin and Nickerson, and so they had shared with me their concerns about the initial tiered approach, which I shared with Jeremy, and so as a result, you all made that change, and I think Mr. Boutier that was one of the issues that they had raised in his letter. I am, as some of my board members know, I'm constantly frustrated with some of the statutes that we have to deal with. I feel like there are some ambiguities in the impact fee statute. One of the things that is a concern to me has to do with the two workshops or two public hearings. I had previously advised the board because by constitution, the school board is the entity responsible for dealing with schools. It makes sense to me that the school board should deal with that and have those public hearings. However, as Reggie indicated, the statute does say that the local government jurisdiction shall hold the two workshops. There are some ambiguities in the law about what local government means there. And I can certainly see, and there's merit in what Reggie said, his position on that. I would hate for the school board and the Board of County Commissioners to move forward on something if you have a built-in issue that could be a source of a challenge, when it might take you a few more weeks to do that, but easily cured if you were to have the BCC have these two hearings that Mr. Boudier referred to. That way you'd eliminate any issue of a challenge on that. I think if there was a challenge, the way we've got it, the two hearings you've already done, I'm not saying it couldn't be defended. I think there are defenses to it, but who wants to waste a year having to go through the courts and have that challenged? With respect to the district, under the Constitution and the statutes, the entire county, not just in Marion County, but the county, each one of the 67 counties, the school district is coextensive with the county. So, but for sure, all the municipalities, or at least the substantial majority of the municipalities, have to buy in to the impact fee ordinance. And so I think Mr. Boudier has raised some points on that are issues that are pretty easy to clean up, I think. I think we, as the chair or someone indicated to Mr. Lee, maybe it was Commissioner Bryant, that obviously we do need to have the city of Ocala's buy-in to this. We have to have them on board with the interlocal agreement. So I think some discussions that could take place pretty quickly are in order on that. So I think those are my main comments.
Yeah, would this meeting serve as one of those public hearings?
Workshop. Well, that's a good question.
Wouldn't it have to be advertised in a certain way for two public hearings?
I'll quote to you, the local government jurisdiction has held not less than two publicly noticed workshops dedicated to the extraordinary circumstances necessitating the need to exceed the phase-in limitations set forth in the impact fee statute.
I would also point out that the only necessity of the
have truly been.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr.
the only necessity for the two joint public workshops would be to demonstrate extraordinary circumstances if the assessment was to be exceeding the phase-in limitations. Not something, and in the ordinance, which is still a valid ordinance but has been suspended for the past many years, those numbers were roughly the same as what our 40% suggestion is here today. So we would not be looking, if we are using those numbers and submitting a proposal at 40%, then there is no need to exceed the phase-in limitations, and therefore the phase-in limitations makes that point moot as to having two additional joint workshops. We didn't have to have them before, and we wouldn't have to have them in the future. So that would be that would be and although we did it from our end, because as Mr. Mentor pointed out, the fact is there is ambiguity because subsection G in the statute identifies a local government, school district, or special district may increase an impact fee rate, which presumes that this school district could increase an impact fee rate, even though you're the levying authority, beyond the phase-in limitations established, if it does the following things, and it outlines those following things, one of them being the 2 joint public workshops. But then the ambiguity that he was mentioning comes down to the local government jurisdiction, that's one of the subsections under that part of the statute, has held not less than 2 publicly noticed workshops. So the ambiguity would be as to whether it would be the county or the school, but the section above that refers to a local government, school district, or special district. So I believe the ambiguity could be resolved in favor of the definition that we have already used. But in an abundance of caution, because as Mr. Mentor indicates, that it is important to be cautious so as not to make a misstep which could be costly or at least result in a challenge, then we would go back to the question of whether we need to exceed the phase-in limitations. Now, the initial Benish study recommendation for one of the classes, for example, was approximately $10,700. Now, when you drop that down to a rate that is 40% of that, that rate becomes something that falls within the already existing impact fee, which has been suspended. So although collection would be reinitiated, it would not be a collection which would exceed the phase-in limitations that are outlined within statute.
It's been suspended.
That's a
Any
good point.
follow-up on that?
No, I think it's a good point.
Okay. Did I finish with public comment? I think there wasn't anybody else that was coming forward. Anybody else in the audience? Okay. Okay, well, let's bring it back to the panel and for comment.
You want me to go first?
Well,
Absolutely.
before you do, can I get a clarification, Commissioner Bryant, before you do that? So House Bill 337, just looking at it, just to make sure I'm following, if I could, Attorney Powers. So the limit on the fee increase is no more than 12.5% per year. It's on page 128. I just want to make sure you're saying.
When you're referring to the House bill, are you also, it's since been made law, so what, I'm looking at statute. What's the?
House Bill
Okay.
337 is all I don't have, I'm just looking at what's in our board package here that gave us the overview of impact fees legal requirements.
Yes, ma'am.
So from what I think I heard you just say, that we can implement this 40% and it's not gonna fall in and we don't have to take this into consideration? Is that what you just said?
Well, I mean, I always take everything into consideration, but yes, that would be the case.
But it doesn't qualify to meet all of these requirements.
Right.
We don't have to meet extraordinary circumstances. We don't have to meet the things that would cause us to be ultra conservative at the moment. None of that applies to the 40%.
Right, and in the plain language, it would indicate that we would be, if we were to increase in excess of those authorized in paragraphs B, C, D, or E, we need, number one, a study, and number two, would also have to have the 2 joint workshops. And we have the study because we didn't know what our number was going to come back with. And the number did come back, in fact, to be over double what the historical collection has been. But then the increase would not be at 40%, and when we're talking different percentages here, it's going to get confusing, so I apologize. But at 40% of the recommendation for the justifiable student generation rates and everything, at 40% of that, it comes out to be very nearly comparable to what the previous collection was before, only slightly higher.
Right.
And so therefore, that would not need extraordinary circumstances. If we did come and say, hey, as a county and as a school board, both entities, we wish to enact an impact fee, which is going to be nearly double, then that clearly falls under, we've got to make that consideration of joint public workshop.
And so even though it's been suspended, again, it doesn't apply, we don't need extraordinary circumstances
Right, it's
to
not
enact them.
not a new collection going from 0 to nothing to.
You good with that, Mr. Mentor?
I think so.
Like me, we reserve the right to come back later and say, hold on, let's make sure.
See, that is
And we'll have
why-
those conversations, but I don't believe that's a problem.
But when you want to talk about extraordinary circumstances, okay, here they are. Explosive growth and no impact fees for how many years now?
12.
Nothing to support that explosive growth, nothing for the school board to use to build new facilities that they would need from the growth. So I think that's extraordinary circumstances.
And
But you can enact an impact fee for what you've done previously. You can only do an impact fee for the future, which,
True.
But that's not talking about what we've done previously. We're talking about the fact that we've had no impact fees. We suspended them in 2011? We've had
Yes.
no impact fees for anything since 2011. And let's go back to the very reason why we suspended impact fees. The very reason that we suspended impact fees was because the economy was in the tank. We had 14.3% unemployment in Marion County. We'd lost over 40% of our property values. We were third highest in the state in foreclosures. We were dying on the vine as a community, and we were trying to do anything and everything that we could to stimulate our economy, to bring our community back. That is the reason, and the only reason, that we suspended impact fees. We're not in that position now. I mean, the fact that
I don't think we're talking against impact fees. I think we're just trying to make sure that we do it appropriately.
Right, and I believe that this attorney over here for the school board, Mr. Powers, and our attorney both have said, while we may have had some mishaps, our charge here today is to have consensus, to give the green light, to move forward with re-implementing impact fees at the new level with the new study. They can work all the details out. They need to get into the weeds, and they need to make sure that they work it out so that when it's done, when the ordinance comes before our board and it's done, that there are no challenges, there's nothing that can be held up legally. That doesn't fall upon our shoulders. That falls upon the attorneys for both of our respective boards to take care of.
Thus, I'm asking the questions.
Dr. James?
If I might, I'd like to ask Banesh, we've been asked to potentially break out the 3 categories into closer to 5 categories. What is the timeline to get data that would break that into the 5 categories?
'Cause they've still
Yeah,
got to do
not the tiers, single family, multifamily, individual, condo, individual, townhome, individual, mobile home park. So we already have the data, but it wasn't presented with its,
Yes.
They don't have it here. So do we have to tell them yes, 40%?
Yeah, that data is already available, so we just have to take out the age restricted, and so that would be a very quick turnaround.
okay, so what my ask would be to the rest of my board and to the county commission is, we are hearing that in the next 2 weeks, we can have, instead of having 3 categories, we could have 5 or 6, however many it is, of all the categories that were, so that we can ensure, to some of the public comments point, that we are covering all of our bases and doing it exactly as the study presents it for, and then adopting at 40%. Because each of those would have a student generation rate, and then we would have an impact fee at 100% presented, which we would then adopt at a certain percentage. That would be our recommendation. So what I would like to ask our board and the county commission today is to come to Commissioner Bryant's point, come to a consensus on that percentage point. So the school board has brought forth 40%, and what I'm looking to hear from the commissioners is how you feel about that 40% number, because I believe if we can come to consensus on that, we will get back the appropriate breakouts from Banesh, and our attorneys will put it together in the proposal. and then we will be able to vote on that and bring it to you for a vote. And in the meantime, an interlocal agreement conversation can happen to ensure that the legalities there are accurate. So that's what I'm asking of the group today, but thank you.
May I also say something? I think that based on the study that has already been presented, there are potentially a number of potential breakout additional categories, like we correctly identified earlier with the mobile home lot versus single-family residence. Mobile home lot versus mobile home park. And those are there. So those are fairly easy, and I believe Mr. Minter would likely agree with me. I don't want to speak for him, that those items which are there, our heartburn as attorneys always comes from, you have to justify each of those breakouts with the SGR. That data is there, so it's justifiable. Within the study that we have, any of those things would be workable to add those additional categories. The problem becomes if we start doing a tiered system that doesn't have student generation rate support. So, for example, if we said, because of the idea of affordable housing, we just want to say that houses that are of a certain square foot smaller or happen to be mobile homes, we're just going to say those are the more affordable homes, and therefore we're going to reduce their rate without having the actual support that shows that. So that would be a bad idea, and that would be what gives us heartburn. But the categories, like you correctly identified, Commissioner Zalak, with the mobile home lot versus mobile home park, that, and potentially also townhome if Benish finds that the sample population size is accurate enough for that. Those are already existing in the data. They are supported. They could be added. Those are things that, for example, if Mr. Lee wanted to, get with us to discuss any of those type of things, those are a simple plug and play, and that is easy. The problem is that if we did it in any other workable way, there'd be a problem. Now, I do want to point out one potential aspect that I could see presenting a problem. Let's assume that there was one breakout, and I don't believe I saw this in any of Benish's numbers, but let's assume there was one breakout type of condo or townhome or something which had previously been assessed under one area, and now the breakout would cause it to have an impact fee assessment, which was in fact a doubling or a tripling of what it previously had to contribute. At that point, then, you can't be a lumper in that. You've got to be you can't be a splitter in that and split it off from the herd, because it's now going to get treated very, very differently, and that's likely as a result of small sample size. So we don't need to. I don't anticipate that happening, but if that did happen, that'd be something that I would have to discuss with Mr. Minter and say, I don't believe we can split this one off from the herd, so to speak.
Commissioner Zalak?
So, Mr. Powers, I really agree with you. And to Dr. James' point, from my perspective, what I would love to see is Stern and Weaver, the city of Ocala, and our teams work together to just do a quick analysis over the next 2 weeks to make sure that I think there is an importance to workforce housing. I think that if we're going to call it workforce housing, it does fall within the 1,000 to probably 1,600 square foot range or something like that. I don't know, and to maybe Reggie's point, if that housing unit actually generates less students than a housing unit that is 16, 17, 18, 2,000 square foot. If it does, let's look at it. If it doesn't, then I think just keeping the entire type as single family makes more sense, right? But those numbers would be useful, because I think as a community, if we could give a benefit to that 1,000 to 1,500 square foot house, and it makes sense, and we can back it up with the student data, then that's great. That's a win for all of us. That's what I think everyone was trying to get to in the first place. If it doesn't show, to Mr. Tillman's point, then we just go back to a complete category, and that makes the most sense for all of us. At the end of the day, you guys need to generate enough money to help with your bond. That's going to include more than just this impact fee source of dollars. And from my perspective as a commissioner, the thing that that we've been working on for the last 10 years is how do we fund public safety? how do we fund our fire and sheriff's department, how do we fund roads, right? It's very much an item just like yours, right? Our transportation impact fees are completely complicated and overly complicated. And half of them become a negotiation with development anyway because of the impact fee credits in transportation and what the developer does on their side. And so it's a tool that we use at some level. I think what we're going to come back though, and our board hasn't talked about it, just like probably your board hasn't had a real discussion about sales tax. It's certainly the best way to collect dollars. It's certainly the most fair across our system. It's not putting that burden on only our citizens, right? It's spreading that over, 30% of visitors and people that come to our community. And if you guys explore that, the only thing that I would ask is that if we do an interlocal agreement, if we move all this forward, that you guys wouldn't run a sales tax at the same time as ours, jeopardizing our public safety and our transportation funding that we've been working really hard over the last decade or so on. So,
if I could follow up with a question, Pete Lee asked the question about reassembling the technical group, and with the questions and so forth, would it be the most judicious and open process to have one meeting of that technical group, let them meet, let the attorneys meet at the same time, and move forward from there to come back to the commission with a finished product?
It's not
Either yes or
necessary.
no, I mean,
I don't think it's necessary.
I agree.
okay. All right.
And I would support that it would be unnecessary, but I will add this caveat. Each time that I've looked at this and I've tried to alter things in a way that is going to work the fixes in that are suggested, this is an area where creativity is punished.
Correct.
This is an area where if we begin looking at how do we tweak it in a different way that takes into account this factor and that factor, that inevitably becomes problematic and requires a lot more work to try to make sure that we go back and get student generation rate data for each of those things. So what I see as workable, clearly, and that's why I stuck with the historical so far, not to say that's the end of it, but the historical, those three categories, which would probably need some slight alteration to account for the mobile home lot. But those three categories were because historically, that's the way it's always been calculated. And that's infinitely supportable by the Benish study. That's exactly supportable at, in fact, the 40% rate. I don't think that adding a modification that more clearly defines the difference between, for example, mobile home lot and mobile home park causes any difficulty, because that's also already contemplated within the study. Possibly the same may be true with townhousing if we split it out as well. The problem is the more that we get away from those things that are infinitely supportable, the more that Mr. Minter and I, the city attorney, everyone else creates risk, and creates risk in a way that makes it so that we could have a substantial tie-up in the amount of time it takes. And when, everyone knows how when we could do things by committee, it typically involves making sure all the stakeholders are together, everybody's gotten their ideas together, and that's great. We also know that it often generates a lot of new ideas that often run into rabbit trails. Well, I'm here to tell you that from my experience so far, nearly every rabbit trail you can go off of this, sticking with what is clearly authorized by statute, is going to be a rabbit trail that leads to a dead end. Or worse yet, a rabbit trail that leads to a fox. So we do want to keep sticking pretty close, and I think the suggestions that have been made here today stick close to that. And certainly anyone who has, ideas, thoughts, suggestions, input, speak to your respective attorneys, and let's work together to make sure that if there's anything that we haven't thought of, that's great. But we got to stick to the narrow path so that we are going to have something that's supportable, that's fair, that takes into account what statute allows and takes into account what is best for our community.
Dr. Campbell and then the Honorable Commissioner Bryant.
Thank you, and thank you, Attorney Powers, because some of what you said is part of what I was going to say as well. Speaking some to Commissioner Zalek's comments, my individual concern with gathering multiple groups into having additional conversations potentially puts us in positions where we are doing a tiered structure that may be getting us beyond the 40%. We as a school board came to this consensus understanding that the recommendation is 100%. And you see a county below us that just approved it. And you see counties all around us that have 100% with just as much growth and just as much. But this board understands, after hearing from our community, that one of the best things we could do for all factors involved is to address it, recommend it at 40%. And the additional opportunities that we might have to put in a different category here or there, as long as it stays at that 40%, I think we would be comfortable. But as you note, the original tiered structure that we presented in the publication date had actually the top tier at 100%. I don't believe that's the recommendation that we as a school board are going to bring forth. And I don't want to see us there. But I also don't want to see us, if we gather minds together again and have additional collaboration and conversation outside of this group today, where we're seeing actually one of those tiers at 5% or 10%, because then that takes us back to a completely different conversation than what we're having today. So I also wanted to speak to Commissioner Zalak's comments about sales tax, because it kind of is the elephant in the room. Also, Mr. Boudier referenced it as well. We have painstakingly gone through this process for the conversation we have today. The conversation, understanding what our significant needs are within Marion County Public Schools, and also to speak, we haven't collected impact fees in 12 years. We also haven't built a new school in more than 12 years. So those two things seem to correlate, ironically. But whenever we're thinking about the process and starting back in our municipality meeting about, 10 months ago or so, we started painting this picture then when all the municipalities were present. We started painting the picture, we started laying out, here's the dire crisis that we are in. And we've gone through this lengthy process to talk about impact fees. And to one of our public speakers' comments, this is a funding source that is available to us that we in a community have not taken advantage of in more than a dozen years. So we have laid out a proposal before you today. I am concerned about continuing to have additional conversations apart from these two bodies, because we know as a school board, you are the decision maker. And so also to a public speaker's comment, we understand that while we have this significant need, statute puts the decision solely in the four of your hands. And so we have come to you today hopeful that we can, to Commissioner Bryant's point, come to some consensus to say, is 40% the number? Is 40% where you're comfortable as four commissioners that we can, if we need to address additional townhouses or mobile home units or however we need to break that out, terrific. We can let the smart heads in the room take care of that part. But as far as getting to consensus and where we can really move forward for what's best interest of our community and what's in the best interest of our students in our community, can we land on a 40% number?
Yeah. Commissioner Bryant, good comment.
So the overlapping red and yellow in the presentation reminded me of our Marion County Fire Rescue chart regarding growth and levels of service. We are at a precipice. If we don't do something now, we will never catch up. We can't keep kicking this can down the road. Each and every one of us sitting on this dais and in this room needs to think about what kind of a community we want to be in the future. Do we want to be known as the most inexpensive place to live with inferior infrastructure as well as services, or do we want to do it the right way? Geographically, we are the 5th largest county in the state of Florida, 19th largest in population, and we are growing at an exponential rate with 220 people a month moving to Marion County with no signs of slowing down. Impact fees are one of the funding sources we have access to that help growth pay for itself as much as it can. To do nothing would be irresponsible. In a recent strategic planning session, we formulated our new vision statement. It says, Marion County is a safe and well-planned community with a thriving economy that supports a high quality of life where family matters. Let me reiterate that, where family matters. Our children matter, and we should want only the best for them. Therefore, I support the Marion County School Board's ask, and I would defer to our county attorney as well as the school board attorney to move this process forward in a timely manner, to schedule the required workshops and/or public hearings, coordination with our municipalities to produce the acceptable final numbers with breakouts, and any other requirements to move this ordinance forward to the Marion County Board of County Commissioners for a final vote. And that will be my last statement.
Good comment. But no, it won't be.
For today.
Okay, any other comments? Yes?
Thank you, and I will say that I heartily concur with Commissioner Bryant. It was my parable to walk away from this today not making waste from haste, but also keeping in mind probably a less biblical directive to something along the lines of getting it done and defining it, and let's get this mission accomplished. That's all I have for today.
Yeah. Anybody else over here? Dr. Jane?
I want to thank the community for sharing their thoughts, and I want to thank Commissioner Bryant for her thoughts. I'm grateful for the opportunity to bring this forward and to start generating some additional revenue for the schools, because we have a vision and a plan, and I've gotten to sit on the selection committee for architects and contractors and tour prototype schools, and what we're going to be able to build for our students is exceptional, but it requires funding sources, and we are beginning to solve this problem on our own. We're going to get that money, and we're going to start solving this problem. But for us to be able to do what we're going to do with these first two new schools all over our district, and to be able to provide a top-tier product for all of our students, it is going to require this as a stepping stone with future funding that is going to be necessary. And so I'm grateful for this conversation, and I would look forward to understanding the remaining three commissioners how you feel about the 40% number. Thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Zalak, any last comment?
No, I still have the same two caveats. I support you guys wholeheartedly. I want you to build great schools. I want to see what Stern's numbers come back at, along with the types that the concerns of the city of Ocala. We're going to need to all be a team in this to move it forward and actually collect the money and put it in your pockets, no matter what, right? So I do need to see those things, and I think within the next 2 weeks we can have those pieces ironed out. And the last thing is, I'm not going to let any of these things jeopardize our transportation and public safety sales tax. So if you guys plan on putting it on the 24 or 26 or along with any of ours in the future, then I'm going to have a problem. So the problem, and that becomes that I think it's just a courtesy thing. What I've realized over the last few years that I've had the opportunity to serve is board members change, people change, staff members change, and then nobody remembers what the deal was, right? And if we have that courtesy to each other, then I think it really does move the ball forward for our entire community. I think, unfortunately, that if we put two sales tax on any referendum in the future, we could jeopardize each other. And both of us could walk away with a significantly better, less funded community in the future. I think it's a big problem. And I think it's something we need to just sit down and address and feel comfortable with each other, because yes, today, maybe the four of us have the control of the impact fees, but in the future, you know, it's purely administrative for you guys to request to put a referendum on the ballot, and we really can't tell you no, right? And so there needs to be some common professional courtesy in how we move forward, so both of us can fund the things the people of Marion County have charged us to do. So,
Yeah.
that's my thoughts.
Commissioner Stone, any comment?
I think everything's been said, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I think we're in good shape to move forward. I've spoken to a lot of people in the community about this latest 40%. It looks like a number that we can live with. And so I just wanted to get down if we were going to do the technical group to finish putting the i's and dotting the crossing the t's. And it looks like we're not going to move with the technical group, but we'll let the attorneys get together, finish the product, not go down any more rabbit holes. And so it looks like we can probably have a consensus to move forward, and time being of the essence. So,
I will ask, though, Dr. Campbell mentioned that she wanted to, set aside time for the smart people to work on these things. I'd like to be working on it too. So, I'm not one of the smart people in the room, but I'm gonna do my best, all right?
I will kind of, are there any last comments?
I did want to speak to Commissioner Zalik's question about sales tax, and as already been laid out, this has been a very calculated process, and what we've done today is come with the first step. We understand that impact fees lay solely in the hands of the county commission, and that's what we're doing today. This board has not had conversation at all about sales tax. This is the first step in the process, and frankly, what happens today, and it seems like we have consensus that we can move forward. We didn't know that walking in today, but if we weren't in a position where it sounded like we might have impact fees, that might also drive a decision to be different than what it could be. Can't speak to what we're going to do, but this is the first step in the process, and without today, and without the potential of having impact fees, that does drive future conversations for us.
That sounds like no. So if that's gonna be a no, then I very well may be out, just so you know, on impact fees. If we can't have a professional conversation about you guys respecting us and us respecting you.
And this board has not had any conversation about sales tax.
Well, that's good. You
Because
guys
all of our focus
Y'all have
has
a board
been,
meeting coming up. Y'all can discuss
all
it.
of our focus has been on impact fees, and that's what the entire presentation was about today.
Gotcha.
And that's where we're going to keep the conversation.
I would say,
All right.
though,
You choose that.
it does not need, we don't fall into that extraordinary situation requiring supermajority. So, based on the conversation that we
Just
had.
ask me what my position was.
I think there's a whole lot of other conversations that need to be had for us to be going down that road.
Yeah, but I just wanted to
Let's
put them
finish
at
this today
ease
and move
that-
forward.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
yeah.
don't need supermajority.
Do we have a date yet for our next joint meeting
I
of
think that
elected
they'll have
officials?
to get with everybody.
Okay, because I would look forward to having conversation collectively about sales tax and how it each impacts us. We're at the point where there is so much need that you have and so much need that we have. I believe our community expects us to have the conversation and to work together as much as we possibly can. And that conversation is obviously one that is not going to get settled today, I don't think. But I would like to have it.
In doing that, I think if you go back and read Mr. Boutier's letter as well, he points out some very good points of how the school board should be looking moving forward as well. So if we do, and when we do, and if we're going to talk about sales tax joining together, I'd like to see your entire plan of how much you're going to generate based on impact fees, when are you going to need sales tax, and that whole plan layout over your 15-year period.
Correct.
So keep that in mind.
Right, because don't we want all of us to be successful?
Absolutely.
All right, well, listen, I appreciate everybody's time, focused on a very important topic for our community. I do want to tell you this, that for the last several months, Jim Hilty, President of the City Council, Dr. Campbell and myself have been meeting at lunches to keep communications open. People a lot of times question the working relationship between these boards. I know our county administrator meets with Pete Lee on a monthly basis, and we will continue to do that to keep dialogues going and information flowing and courtesies and the goodwill. So I think we've accomplished a lot here today. I think we can move forward with the 40%, hopefully, and the community will benefit. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.